Hello, and welcome to another episode of the museum. Harry Raymond was the chief of police in San Diego during a time of radical instability. In fact, between 1929 and 1940, 10 other people were selected as chief of police for the city of San Diego. Harry Raymond was appointed chief of police in the summer of 1933. But with City Hall politics being what they are, and insider cliques, his tenure was short-lived. Raymond was fired within 90 days of his appointment to the office. Raymond left San Diego and returned to Los Angeles, hoping to live a life of obscurity. But in 1938, he single-handedly took down Los Angeles City Hall.
Was like a melodious dream, sweet moon song that wasn't meant for me. Why is it always
When Robert Newsom resigned as chief of police after less than a year in office, competition for his job came down between two men, San Diego Fire Chief Louis Almgren and Los Angeles detective Harry Raymond. Almgren had served as a fire chief since 1909 and had experience in local city hall politics. He tried to use that to his advantage with the local power brokers, but a career fireman running a police agency wouldn't be a natural fit. With 25 years of experience in law enforcement, including bureau chief for the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and chief of police in the now defunct Venice Police Department, it seemed Harry Raymond would be the ideal candidate. However, there are rumors of an underworld connection. San Diego Councilman Harry Warburton was one of the 4 councilmembers who traveled to Los Angeles to investigate those claims. He later publicly proclaimed the rumors were just that, rumors. When Warburton secured the support of 3 other councilmembers, Harry Raymond was a shoo-in for the chief's job, even though the mayor publicly stated his choice was SDPD Detective Lieutenant John T. Peterson. Peterson had served as acting chief from June 1932 until August of the same year and was well regarded amongst the rank and file. Shortly after the June 5, 1933 5-2 vote that confirmed Raymond as the new chief of police, he took up residence in the swanky U.S. Grant Hotel downtown. His salary was $300 per month. One of his first battles would be trying to get a grip on the political influence that, despite a new charter making it illegal, was still attempting to run the police department. The outside tampering was not something readily disclosed to Raymond when he applied for the chief's job, and he would have been foolish to think he could have changed it.
During the mid-1990s, I was the vice squad sergeant here in San Diego. And it was an easy time. We weren't influenced by anybody, especially City Hall. We were out there enforcing the laws that had been placed for us to do.
Oh, that would have been a real treat for a guy like Harry Raymond. Even though liquor was illegal due to prohibition, he was downtown enforcing liquor laws. Now, you would think, and certainly in the world you just described, that would be what you would expect a policeman to do. Unfortunately, there was sort of a wink and a nod of, yeah, we know it's illegal, but, this guy wields a lot of money, a lot of influence on City Hall, so that wasn't the case with Harry.
No, in fact, there were a few places downtown that had been around in the 30s, and they were still in operation, owned by the same families that actually tried to give us a few things and say, go ahead and take it. It's been that way for a long time. But we knew what the rules were, and we went by the rules of the day.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he brought in kind of a rigid ethics like that, but it wasn't supported above his head, and being an at-will employee really was very dangerous for a chief during that time period to do.
I imagine so. I mean, any miscue, and he'd be out of office quickly.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately what happened.
So. Exactly.
Harry Raymond's tenure as police chief lasted less than 90 days. On September 3, 1933, city manager Fred Lockwood announced he had fired Raymond by stating he simply wasn't the right man for the job. Former acting chief of police John T. Peterson was immediately installed as the new chief, and Harry Raymond was sent packing. Shortly after being evicted from his office at police headquarters at 700 2nd Avenue, Raymond also issued his own statement to the press. "I plan to remain in San Diego for a few months," Raymond said. "Do I plan to work? That's no one's business but my own." He eventually found his way back to Los Angeles, however. He eventually crossed paths with restaurateur Clifford E. Clinton, the boyish owner of his self-proclaimed world's largest cafeteria in downtown Los Angeles. Clinton was sympathetic to the economic hardships caused by the Great Depression, and his massive cafeteria is known for allowing customers to decide what they could afford to pay for their meals. Clinton was a people person and made it a point to interact with all of his patrons. By 1937, he had heard so many tales of civic vice and dishonesty, he took it upon himself to become a political reformer. On February 16, 1937, Clinton was sworn in as a member of the Los Angeles County Grand Jury. The group soon uncovered organized gambling, bookmaking, and prostitution. Despite the activities being illegal, the 19-member grand jury discovered activities were rampant across the City of the Angels and was all being protected by City Hall and the LAPD. Frustrated by the apathy of the grand jury, Clinton launched his own private investigation, and by the end of June he had accumulated a list of more than 1,800 bookies, 200 gambling spots, and 600 brothels. His attempts to present the evidence to the grand jury, unfortunately, was met with resistance, so Clinton went about publishing the names and addresses in a local newspaper. When a powerful women's group saw the list, its leader met with Los Angeles Mayor Frank Shaw demanding an explanation. The mayor denied the existence of protected vice and declared the LAPD was one of the best police forces in the United States. The mayor added he would support any fair and unbiased citizen organization who wanted to investigate vice in the city. Local religious leaders took the mayor at his word, and on August 19th, CIVIC, which stood for Citizens Independent Vice Investigating Committee, was formed. Clifford Clinton was named as chairman of the committee. On August 3rd of that same year, Clinton and other committee members met with Mayor Shaw at City Hall. The meeting was also attended by LAPD Chief James Edgar Davis and Joe Shaw, the mayor's brother and chief of staff. The meeting got off to a rocky start, however, when Mayor Shaw pointed at the committee members and angrily accused them of, quote, being snoopers, busybodies, and self-seekers who intended to smear his office. Clinton simply responded by saying, "If your administration's actions are as you claim, and if you wish to silence the critics, this is a certain and sure way to do it." Chief of Police Davis had initially opposed the investigation, but following the meeting, he personally pinned badge number 4010 onto Clinton's lapel to deputize him as a private vice investigator. The badge was one of thousands Davis handed out during his administration. Commonly referred to as juice badges, the shields became such a nuisance in the hands of common citizens across Los Angeles. LAPD Chief Arthur Holman converted the agency's badge to the now iconic Series 6 in 1940, then obtained a trademark on it. Several days after the meeting, Mayor Shaw repudiated the group again, this time in the press, calling the committee a group of malcontents and snoopers whose only interest was to besmirch the fair city of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, as the mayor publicly condemned CIVIC, the group headed by Clifford Clinton and attorney A. Brigham Rose worked behind the scenes with Harry Raymond as their investigator, methodically building a case of graft. Things were about to get ugly. On October 27, 1937, the Clinton children were asleep in their family home when a loud crash shattered the night calm. Suddenly, black smoke came pouring from the basement. The fire department responded, and as investigators shifted through the charred remnants, Clifford Clinton received a phone call. The caller, in a mysterious voice, asked, "How did you like the little puff you just had? If you think that's something, just keep your nose in this business and see what happens next." Investigators quickly determined the cause of the fire was a bomb. As shocking as that may have been, no one could predict what was about to happen next. Harry Raymond.
A quiet neighborhood in Boyle Heights, the home of Detective Harry Raymond. As his investigations for reformer Clifford Clinton continued, he was put under surveillance by the Los Angeles Police Intelligence Unit. Across the street and up an alley, they rented a spy house. Looking out this very window, Earl Kynette, the head of the unit, could keep tabs on Raymond, and with a phone tap, listen in on his calls probing City Hall. January 14th, 1938. Harry Raymond's wife was fresh out of eggs. Shaved and dressed for the day, Harry volunteered to run by the market. He grabbed the keys and headed for the car. Got in, stepped on the starter. The explosion was heard for miles around. For blocks in all directions, windows were smashed. Authorities raced to the scene, as did reformer Clifford Clinton. Harry Raymond proved as tough as fictional Philip Marlowe. A mass of broken bones and more than 100 bloody wounds. He was heard to mumble, This is a rotten way to try and get a man. For weeks, doctors dug shrapnel out of him, and still didn't get all of it. Harry couldn't believe what had happened to him, and at first was mum as to who he thought tried to kill him. But then one of his doctors received a threatening phone call. That did it. Kynette, Earl Kynette, he blurted. And with those words, he blew the lid off Los Angeles. The trial was sensational. Taken to the Hall of Justice in a wheelchair, Harry Raymond was cheered on by crowds shouting, "Stay in there, Harry! Tell them all of it, Harry! Good luck, Harry!" The courtroom is abandoned now, but in 1938 it was packed and hushed as Harry Raymond testified about City Hall payoffs, bribes, bagmen, and a near-fatal attempt to cool him off. It didn't look good for Earl Kynette. In desperation, he attempted to impress the jury by improving his appearance with glasses and a mustache. It didn't work. The evidence mounted. He was even identified as the buyer of the bomb's detonating wire. In the final days of the trial, Police Chief James Davis took the stand, couldn't get his story straight, and dug Kynette in even further.
People against Earl E. Kynette and others. Are the defendants ready for sentence at this time?
Defendants are ready, Your Honor.
The verdict went out over the airwaves.
Will the defendants arise, please? Whereas you, Earl E. Kynette, have been duly found guilty by a jury in this court of the crime of attempted murder, it is therefore ordered, adjudged, and decreed that you be punished by imprisonment in the state prison at San Quentin.
He got 10 years to life, and the trial exposed a city hall rife with corruption. Reformers and newspapers clamored for a special election to recall the Mayor Shaw administration.
It had become too blatant. And newspapers don't like the reputation of the City of Angels to be dragged in the dirt and the mire. So Fletcher Barron was elected on the recall. And from that, the walls came tumbling down gradually.
Grant Cooper now and then as campaign manager for LA's reform mayor, Fletcher Barron.
He threw the rascals out because, by God, he threw them out like a bouncer does. You see him in the movies.
Barron's takeover was truly remarkable. For the first time in American history, the mayor of a major city and all his cronies were run out of office.
The aftermath of LA's biggest scandal would reshape the political landscape of Los Angeles forever. By the time Harry Raymond finished spilling his secrets, Mayor Frank Shaw was recalled from office and Police Chief James Edgar Davis was fired. 10 members of the LAPD went to jail for their role in the bombing. The most prominent, 38-year-old Earl Kynette, a 15-year veteran with a once bright future in the LAPD, including sending 4-time murderer Rattlesnake James to the gallows at San Quentin. Kynette would languish behind bars until 1952. While incarcerated, Kynette studied pharmacy and would ultimately put those skills to use toward making a living in rural Tuolumne County, east of Modesto. He died in 1971. Meanwhile, World War II shifted the public's attention from Los Angeles City Hall to the international stage. By the time the war had ended, Harry Raymond, the once scrappy former police chief hailed as a civic hero, had failed into obscurity. By the late 1950s, he was back in San Diego. However, he was a broken man. In July of 1956, Harry was arrested for drunk in public by officers of the very department he once commanded. Neither of the policemen who brought him in that day had any idea who he was. The world had changed a lot by the time Harry Raymond died on April 1st, 1957. Less than 19 years after he literally brought Los Angeles to its knees, the San Diego Police Department had been stabilized, free of City Hall politics, and 10 years into the tenure of Chief Adam Elmer Jansen. To the north, the LAPD was on a similar but more high-profile path. When Chief William Parker took office as chief of police in 1950, he began cleaning house. Dozens of officers were fired for corruption before Parker then turned to Hollywood, primarily with producer Jack Webb, in an attempt to brand his department as the most recognizable police agency in the world. Meanwhile, San Diego wasn't far behind. In 1959, the TV show Manhunt was filmed on location in San Diego. Like Dragnet, it featured professional, clean-cut police officers who always got their man. 78 episodes were filmed, many on location around the city, before the show finally left the air in 1961. We really hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up down below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We post new videos as they become available. For more information on the San Diego Police Museum, visit our website, and of course, we are open to the public as well. And as always, thank you for watching.
Once I tried to capture the rapture of the night. Silly dreams I knew would disappear, but it seems they left a souvenir. One refrain eternal